Okay. Hi, Jack.
Hi, Hiroshi. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. How is Dublin?
Very warm today, surprisingly.
Oh, really? It's going into the autumn season already over there, right?
Yes, the last couple of weeks have been very cold, but surprisingly today is beautiful. It's a real beach day.
Oh, but I envy you because Japan quite hot, not enjoyable. It's really humid and hot these days. Crazy.
Yes, I remember Japanese summers very well.
Thank you. All right. Now let's start topic discussion. So now you are teaching English, University College of Dublin, and then to the student from abroad. And also I know that you taught English in Japan too. And based on your experience and the professional background, please let me know or let everybody know about kind of feedback for Japanese student to learn and utilize their English ability more. So please, tell us frankly.
I'd be very happy to. In my experience, and I've been a teacher both in Japan and in Ireland for about 10 years now. And a lot of students, no matter where they come from, they tend to have the same issues. There are certain universal issues that all students have. And one of them would be the fact that a lot of students, because of how they learn at school, they do a lot of reading. They may do some listening, but quite often their grammar level will be high, but their actual speaking ability is often quite low. And so it may sound easy to say, but one of the first things to do is to get as much practice as possible speaking, and especially to think of your classroom as a place to go and make mistakes, because that's what a classroom is. That's a place where you make mistakes before you go out into the real world.
Okay.
And not everything needs to be word perfect. And in fact, your teacher will be able to help you when you make mistakes in class. They can see what areas you need to work on. So trying to produce language is really key in terms of building up your communication skills.
I see. So in other words, maybe you can say like a Japanese student, many Japanese students are so afraid of making mistakes.
Absolutely. I still have Japanese students at University College Dublin, and the ones I can usually tell the ones that have been here for a while, because they tend to be a lot freer about making mistakes. And then the ones who have just arrived, who are still very, very careful and structure their sentences.
I see.
Of course, it's good to be correct. I'm not saying that it's not, but not when that not when that has a negative effect on your actual communication.
I see.
And so yeah, making mistakes, it's a necessary part of language and producing good language.
I agree. And also, I would like to tell you that even the real world of the business or whatever it is, of course, sometimes Japanese are considering to create a perfect English. That is why they hesitate to speak out. So it's so-called, I'm saying like a mental block of speaking because they are afraid of making a mistake. But do you have any suggestion for that?
I mean, in terms of making mistakes, they do happen in real life as well as in the classroom. I worked for a long time in Japan with engineers and designers, and many of them would go on business trips abroad and deal with foreign projects. And yes, that means a lot of interaction with engineers and designers from their partner companies. And in those situations, yes, I mean, it's really the most important thing is that your message comes across. And there are certain key words in that message that you will need to get right. But However, a lot of your small grammar errors and problems with prepositions, is it in or to or on or at, they don't really make a big impact on how people understand you.
Sure.
And the key words are your content words, your nouns and your verbs. So as long as you don't make too many mistakes with those, you will be understood, and people will do their best to understand you also.
So you can say, don't afraid to make a mistake anyway, as far as you can communicate it.
Exactly. I mean, that's the goal of any interaction, is communication. And as long as your logic is quite clear and that the person can follow your general meaning, then yes, I mean, mistakes do happen. And the more experience you get, the more practice you have, the better you will be, and the fewer mistakes you will eventually make. But that first step is a very hard one to take. I understand that, but it is a necessary one to just produce and to get as much practice as you can.
Wow, that's great. Now, you mentioned about as far as the logic is all right, but sometimes, logic building is really different from many Japanese talking about English people, I mean, English speakers, So do you have any idea, like, are there any confusion when you listen to the Japanese English talking about the logic?
Well, if we're talking about two different kinds of speaking here, I feel, Hiroshi, if you're talking about a very structured kind of speaking, such as the kind of speaking that you would do when you prepare a presentation, for example, then of course, at that time, because you're preparing exactly what you will say, you should spend a lot of time preparing the logic and the signposting of what you're going to tell somebody. So, for example, with a presentation, and the kind of golden rule with presentations is, first you tell the audience what you will tell them, then you tell them, and then after you finish, you tell them what you have told them. So you're actually telling them the same thing 3 times, but that really gets your message across. And if there are any problems with your logic, they should become very clear to both you, the speaker, and to the audience, who can ask you questions, and you can then correct it. In terms of more unstructured kind of speaking, which is more free talking, which is more difficult, of course.
Sure.
The important thing, again, is to focus on your contents words and to make sure that those are clear. And don't worry too much about smaller errors, as long as the main gist of your message can be understood.
Okay. Yeah, that is sometimes really tough for many Japanese, because they tend to speak out from the background, so many. And that confuse many Westerners to understand. So, but you encourage that, say, main point, you mean, like what you want to say, that is the most important. Then enhance and kind of emphasis to the audience or people who is talking to. Am I correct?
Pretty much, absolutely, yeah. It comes down to experience. The more experience you get, the more you will notice the difficulties that you have when you speak. And of course, there's lots of great resources out there to use to help you with your English. And as you get to higher and higher levels, using more natural resources or authentic sources of English, such as articles, podcasts, TV shows, and they can show you how a natural speech can flow, and how you can copy that, and how you can learn it and do it yourself.
Yeah, in an actual conversation, not the writing, actual conversation, in case of that, of course, sometimes people exchange jokes, and joke is also, of course, it is a side issue, but it's quite important to, how can I say, make a good atmosphere to talk about it. But joke is different from every countries, right?
Absolutely.
Every country has a different joke. And just give me an idea, like what is a typical, how can I say, difference between American joke and so-called British or Irish joke?
Well, I mean, one thing that is very different in a lot of Western countries is the use of sarcasm. And I guess for Japanese, you translate it as hiniku. And this is very much a part of American humor. but is less so in Europe. To be honest, we Europeans, we find Americans to use sarcasm a lot in their humor. But for a Japanese, we probably use a lot of sarcasm compared to them too. So it's all about, it's on a scale, you know. But that is one big difference in the style of humor that you will find in different countries. And you're absolutely right. And what works, what is funny in one culture can be completely not at all funny, completely like a dead fish, you know, in another culture. So yeah, humor is something that's very unique from culture and language to culture and language. It's not something that's easy to replicate. And to be honest, I was just saying this with some of my students this week, actually, was one of the hardest things to do well is to be funny in a foreign language. So if you manage to make a joke in a foreign language, you know you're doing pretty well.
Sure, that is quite actually high level of the conversation. But to do it, I believe that the people need to know the society, or maybe even the historical background of each country, and to understand their jokes and also like a sarcastic kind of point of view. So, I mean, how do you think? Like, I mean, sometimes, you know, English study is just focusing on only language, but sometimes it is a good idea to learn about society. Is that right?
Absolutely. Well, all of these things come into play when we communicate, because language is just one part of communication. And a lot of it is factors that are not related to language at all, about gesture, about facial expressions, and yeah, about cultural knowledge and historical knowledge. And if you know the background of who you're talking to and where they come from, that can really change how you interact with them. And especially when it comes to things like humor, absolutely, but also in terms of things like small talk topics. And maybe certain topics that you would approach certain people from certain countries, you wouldn't talk about certain things. And then with other countries, other people, it would be completely fine. So an awareness of that, I think, is really key to communicating effectively.
I totally agree. Well, you know, in Dublin, you know, it's quite famous for its beer. So when you know, have a kind of casual conversation with a beer, there are a lot of jokes, I believe. But please, you know, give a Japanese a kind of a comment that's to be, how can I say, casual, to be casual or friendly or relax. How to do that in a foreign countries, particularly, for example, like a place in a beer with a kind of a, let me say, for example, like Irish people, you know, and maybe they are really nervous sometimes, you know, I mean, how to deal with the culture or how to deal with different people. So please give a suggestion. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, one thing that comes to mind is you were talking about how having an awareness of the culture and history of a place can really help you in this kind of situation. And one thing that springs to mind is the fact that obviously in Japan, you have the whole senpai kohai system of seniors and juniors. And that doesn't really exist in Western countries. There's a lot less hierarchy. And so in terms of humor and jokes, whereas it may be difficult in Japan to make a joke about your boss, it's quite possible in Ireland or the UK in the right context and with the right language. And of course, if everybody knows you're joking. So my advice would be is to kind of try as much as it is possible to let go of these kind of ideas of a hierarchy when you come to the UK or Ireland, because the people you interact with that are here, they won't be thinking about those things. And that changes the language we use with each other, both with younger people making fun of older people and the other way around. So yeah, that's one piece of advice I could think of.
Oh, that's interesting. So which means like, how can I say, of course, people must be nice, but okay. But it's okay to be more like an equal, can I say? Instead of the hierarchy, instead of considering about hierarchy, you can say more like a freely and kind of based on an equal background, can I say, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with that. And it is a little bit more equal. Of course, you do have to be careful. You can't say anything you like about anyone. But generally speaking, compared to Asian societies such as Korea, China, Japan, yes, it's certainly you have a bit more freedom to maybe speak your mind. And of course, that's quite an easy thing to do after you've had a couple of beers.
Yeah, that's good to know. Yeah, thank you, Jack. Do you have anything else, which you have a kind of a suggestion to Japanese, just as a summary? Do you have any?
In closing, yeah, I mean, in terms of the kind of issues that I often see with Japanese students, one of the main ones can be to do with pronunciation issues. And the best way to deal with that is clearly just through exposure, is through listening to as much English as you possibly can. As I previously mentioned, there are a lot of good resources out there, and a lot of good resources that promote teaching through listening, such as the BBC or the British Council. They have some great resources for listening, and particularly with the sounds of English. So the more practice you get, the more awareness you get, it can really help you communicate well, and also to have less worry about communicating. If the more confidence you have in the sounds you're making, and the more easily it will flow, and it's a knock-on effect. It'll help you a lot when you're actually speaking.
Oh, this is a beautiful suggestion. Yeah, thank you very much, Jack, for your time. And
you're very welcome, Hiroshi.
See you in real, not virtually, but I'll see you in real, like in Dublin or Tokyo somewhere soon.
I look forward to it. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.